Hey guys, welcome back to Genealogy and Chronology. Today we are back to Middle Earth and we will be discussing about the complete timeline of Dark Lord Sauron. I post two new videos each month concerning history, chronology and lore. Consider subscribing to my channel and following me on Reddit to find the high resolution copy of this chart. Please check out my Middle Earth series which has 15 videos going over family trees of almost every major royal house from Tolkien's Legendarium and also the complete timeline of Arda, the Palantiri, the One Ring, the Silmarils, and Lady Galadriel. Let's move on to today's topic. Sauron was one of the Ainur, the Holy Ones, and was created by Eru Ilúvatar out of his thoughts. This means that Sauron existed before Arda was created. Since he was one of the Ainur, Sauron participated in the Ainulindale, the music of the Ainur, and contributed to the creation of Arda. Sauron was among the Ainur that descended into Ea to help the Valar craft Arda for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar. As mentioned by Tolkien himself, Sauron was not evil right from the beginning. He served under Vala Aule and learned from him the art of crafting. Sauron would later become a spy working under Melkor and rise to become Melkor's lieutenant. Sauron served under Melkor until the end of the first age, when Melkor was captured and thrown into the endless void. In the second age, Sauron declared himself the Dark Lord, successor to Melkor, and built his stronghold in Mordor. In disguise of Anatar, he guided the elven smiths in crafting the rings of power. In secret, he crafted the one master ring to control all the other ring bearers. Despite his setbacks, Sauron would go on to cause the sinking of Numenor in the late Second Age and continue to afflict the free people of Middle-earth throughout the Third Age until he was defeated. Let's discuss the timeline of Sauron in detail. Sauron was an Ainur, a Maya, one of the many holy spirits that Eru created out of his thought. Sauron descended into Arda to assist the Valar in preparing Arda for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar. He entered the service of Aule the smith and learnt from him the skill of smithing. He mastered the skill and became the greatest smith in Arda, second only to Aule. As per Tolkien's writings, Sauron was not evil right from the beginning. Sauron disliked uncertainty and discomposure, favoring order and unity, which sets him apart from Melkor, whose primary goal was to cause disruption and undo everything that the Valar did. Sauron served under Aule for much of the early days of Arda and might have witnessed the first war and the marring of Arda. Melkor fled when Tulkas descended into Arda around Valiant year 1500. We know that Aule and Tulkas labored for 400 Valiant years to heal Arda from the destructions of Melkor. Sauron likely served under Aule during these years. After the completion of Arda and the Two Lamps, Sauron chose to dwell on the Isle of Almarin along with the Valar. Melkor returned to Arda in Valiant year 3400 and he seduced Sauron to join his side. Sauron would become a spy working for Melkor and continue to live on the Isle of Almarin until it was destroyed by Melkor. 50 years later, in Valiant year 3450, along with the Two Lamps, it is likely that Sauron assisted Melkor during this event. After the destruction of the Two Lamps and the creation of the Two Trees in Valiant year 3500, Sauron moved to Valinor. The Valar were still unaware of the treachery of Sauron. With no source of light in Middle-earth, the Valar were concerned about the children of Ilúvatar who were to be awakened soon. In Valiant year 4500, Varda fashioned new stars from Telpedion's light and placed these stars into the respective constellations so that it may aid in navigation for the firstborn. Around the same time, Aule also created 7 dwarf fathers and their wives. When Ilúvatar learnt about this, he adopted the dwarfs and put them to sleep until the awakening of elves. In 1050 of the Years of the Trees, 144 elves were awakened in Cuenannen on the eastern shores of the Sea of Helgar, and thus began the first stage. This part of Arda was still in darkness as the lands east of the Pelori mountain range did not receive any light from the Two Trees. The dwarves were also awakened shortly after the elves. It was sometime before the awakening of elves that Sauron left Valinor and returned to Middle-earth. In 1090 of the Years of the Trees, the Valar declared war upon Melkor as he afflicted the newly awakened elves. The war lasted for 9 valiant years. The Valar laid siege to Utumno and captured Melkor and brought him to Valinor. Melkor was cast into the halls of Mandos for 300 valiant years. Sauron, Melkor's lieutenant, evaded capture by hiding in the pits of Angband. Melkor was released in 1400 of the Years of the Trees. He envied the elves because of whom he was captured. In 1495 of the Years of the Trees, Melkor killed King of the Noldor, Finwë, and stole Fëanor's Silmarils and also destroyed the two trees with the help of Ungoliant. Men were awakened with the rising of the sun in the first year of the Years of the Sun. Thus began the second spring of Arda and accounting of time in terms of solar years. Melkor, now known as Morgoth, left his stronghold of Angband to afflict the newly awakened men and left Sauron as commander of Angband while he was away. In 457 of the Years of the Sun, Sauron attacked Minas Tirith, a watchtower built by Finrod and commanded by his nephew Orodreth. The watchtower became Sauron's stronghold after the attack and was renamed Tol in Gohor, Isle of the Werewolves. In 460 of the Years of the Sun, after Sauron found Barahir's hideout, the entire company of Barahir was massacred at Tan Orlean. Later, Beren pursued the Orc company that killed his father and recovered the Ring of Barahir from the Orcs. 5 years later, Beren would meet Luthien and they both fell in love. However, Thingol disapproved of this marriage and asked Beren to retrieve one Silmaril from Morgoth's crown as a bride price for his daughter. Thus began the quest for the Silmaril. Finrod would aid Beren in this quest along with 10 other elves from Nargothrond. Upon reaching Tol in Gohor, Beren and Finrod along with their entire company were captured by Sauron. Finrod competed with Sauron in Songs of Power, but Sauron's might was greater. All the elves would lose their lives in this quest, including Finrod, who was mortally wounded while trying to defend Beren from a werewolf. The quest was lost if not for Luthien and Huan, who came to Tol in Gohor. Huan killed every werewolf that came in his way, and Sauron shapeshifted into a werewolf. Nonetheless, Huan defeated Sauron, despite Sauron shapeshifting again into a serpent. Finally, Sauron was forced to flee in the form of a vampire to Tor Nufuin. Sauron likely served as Morgoth's lieutenant throughout the War of Wrath. Following Morgoth's defeat and capture, Sauron adopted a fair form. He repented for his deeds in front of Eonwë, herald of Manwë. Eonwë ordered Sauron to return to Valinor to receive the judgment of Manwë, but Sauron was not ready to suffer such humiliation and fled to Middle-earth. As the Second Age began, the Valar raised an island for the Edain in the Sea of Belegar. This island came to be known as Numenor, but Sauron remained dormant for 5 centuries. Around 500 of the Second Age, Sauron began stirring evil in the east. Learning about the rise of Numenor, in year 1000 of Second Age, Sauron moved to Mordor and started constructing Barad-dûr. In 1200 of Second Age, Sauron once again put on a fair form and came to elves, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, an emissary from the Blessed Realm. High King Gil-galad and Galadriel both rejected his offers, but Sauron was well received by Gwaith and Myrddin, the smiths of Eregion. By 1500 of Second Age, Gwaith and Myrddin began crafting the Rings of Power, while by 1590 of Second Age, Celebrimbor, without the aid of Sauron, crafted the 3 Elven Rings of Power. 10 years later, in 1600 of Second Age, Sauron returned to Mordor and in secret crafted the One Ring. In this ring, he invested much of his own power and willed to dominate the bearers of the other Rings of Power. With the aid of the One Ring, Sauron completed the construction of Barad-dûr. The elves were now aware of Sauron's true intentions, and when Sauron demanded the elves to return their Rings of Power, the elves refused. This led to Sauron declaring war upon elves in 1693. By 1697, Eregion was sacked and the doors of Durin were shut, and Celebrimbor was slain by Sauron. Elrond led the surviving elves towards the north and established Imladris, but Sauron pushed further and besieged Imladris. Sauron was now the lord of most of Middle-earth, and the elves would have lost this war if not for the aid that came from Numenor. In 1700, Tar Minastir sent a massive Numenorean fleet which overran Sauron's entire ranks. who was forced to flee with only a handful of his surviving vanguard. Sauron was defeated but not killed. He continued to afflict the men from east and south and forced them into his service. Around the same time, he distributed 9 rings of power among men and 7 rings of power among dwarfs. The dwarfs proved of little use to Sauron as they only grew greedy for more wealth. The men, on the other hand, became ringwraiths. Sauron took the title King of Men, which offended Númenórean king Ar-Pharazôn, who sailed to Middle-earth to battle Sauron. Seeing the might and glory of Númenórean army, Sauron surrendered without even a battle. He was taken as a hostage to Númenor, but once in Númenor, Sauron quickly rose in favor of Ar-Pharazôn. Sauron soon came to be known as Zigur, the Wizard. The rift between the faithful and the Kingsmen was further widened when Sauron built a temple for the worship of Morgoth and corrupted many Númenóreans and made human sacrifice of the faithful. In 3310 of the Second Age, Sauron would convince Ar-Pharazôn to prepare a massive fleet and sail to Valinor. In 3319, Ar-Pharazôn sailed to Valinor with his great armament. Eru intervened and the entire fleet of Ar-Pharazôn, along with the island of Númenor, was drowned beneath the sea. Sauron once again suffered the loss of his physical form as he went down with the sinking of Númenor, but his spirit endured and returned to Middle-earth. A few faithful Númenóreans survived the downfall of Númenor and came to Middle-earth and established their realms in exile, Arnor and Gondor, under the high kingship of Elendil. In 3429 of Third Age, Sauron attacked Gondor, which paved the way for the formation of the last alliance between the Elves and the Númenóreans. Sauron was defeated and a siege was laid upon Mordor in 3434 of Second Age. After a 7-year-long siege, Sauron was forced to come out of his fortress and battle with High Kings Gil-galad and Elendil. Sauron was defeated while Gil-galad and Elendil themselves lost their lives in this combat. Then Isildur cut the One Ring from Sauron's finger, claiming it for himself. However, the One Ring would be with Isildur for just 2 years, whereafter it was lost in the river Anduin for almost 2.5 millennia. The realms in exile split into 2 independent kingdoms upon Isildur's death. The line of Isildur inherited Arnor, whereas the line of Anarion inherited Gondor. Both realms prospered for a millennium, following which Sauron began to stir evil once again in 1000 of Third Age. Sauron moved to Mirkwood in 1050 of the Third Age and built another stronghold, Dol Guldur. By 1300, Sauron ordered the Witch King to establish the evil realm of Angmar in Eriador. This set the stage for centuries-long struggle between Angmar and Arnor, which ultimately led to the dissolution of Arnor. The royal line of Dunedain became secret in the north following the death of Arvedui, the last king of Arthedain. In south, the line of kings died out by 2050 of Third Age. The Nazgûl captured Minas Ithil in 2002 of Third Age and found the Palantir, which Sauron used until his final defeat. Gandalf visited Dol Guldur in 2063 to inquire about what evil dwelt there, but Sauron fled to east before Gandalf found anything. While he was in the east, he swayed the Easterlings to work under him. His absence resulted in 4 centuries of peaceful time, known as a Watchful Peace. Sauron returned in 2460, and 3 years later, in 2463, the One Ring was found by Deagol. In 2480, Sauron ordered orcs and trolls to populate the Misty Mountains and build strongholds. In 2850, Gandalf discovered that the Necromancer is indeed Sauron. In 2939 of Third Age, Sauron learns that One Ring was lost in River Anduin and sends its servants to search for it. In 2941, Gandalf decided to attack Dol Guldur with the help of the White Council in parallel with the quest of Erebor. This was to prevent Sauron and Smaug from assisting each other. Sauron was defeated and forced to flee to Mordor. However, Dol Guldur was not destroyed. Sauron ordered Khamûl and 2 other Nazgûl to reoccupy Dol Guldur. Barad-dûr was rebuilt by Nazgûl between 2951 and 2953 of Third Age. Sauron continued to build his armies and strengthen himself. In year 3000 of Third Age, Saruman began using the Orthanc stone and Sauron managed to corrupt him using the Ithil stone. Thus Saruman began building his army in Isengard and became an ally of Sauron. 9 years later, in 3009 of Third Age, Gollum was captured by Sauron's servants when he ventured into Mordor in search of the One Ring. Gollum would be Sauron's prisoner until 3017, revealing to Sauron that the One Ring was now in the possession of Bilbo Baggins. In 3018, Sauron ordered the Nazgul to search for the One Ring in the Shire. He orchestrated an attack on Osgiliath so that the Nazgul could cross Anduin and travel to Shire. The Nazgul failed in this task after they were unhorsed in the river Bruinen in late 3018. In early 3019, Saruman was defeated by Rohan and Isengard was overthrown by the Ents. The Orthanc stone came under Gandalf's possession, and out of curiosity, when Pippin looked into the Palantiri, Sauron assumed that Saruman was forcing Pippin to look into the Palantiri, as if he was captured and the One Ring was now under Saruman's possession. Using the same Palantir, Aragorn revealed himself to Sauron as the Heir of Isildur by wielding the Anduril, which made Sauron to think that Aragorn now possessed the One Ring. In his haste, he ordered the Witch King to march towards Gondor. The Witch King was killed during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. With the aid of the Rohirrim, the assault from Minas Morgul was repelled, albeit at heavy losses. Gandalf suggested that the armies of free people should march to the gates of Mordor. This was suggested so that Sauron had his focus on the Black Gate and not on Frodo. This plan proved successful as Sauron did not realize that the One Ring was in his backyard until Frodo claimed it for himself. Before Sauron could retrieve the One Ring or any of the ring wraiths could reach the cracks of Mount Doom, Gollum had already bitten the ring from Frodo's finger and slipped and fell into the fiery chasm. Sauron was defeated. With the destruction of the One Ring, Barad-dûr crumbled and his armies were vanquished. Galadriel later crossed Anduin and threw down the walls of Dol Guldur and lay its bare open to the sky. I hope you all like this video of the complete timeline of Sauron. Be sure to join me next month as I will discuss another interesting topic from Middle-earth. You can watch the Middle-earth playlist, which has 15 videos going over every major royal house from Tolkien's Legendarium, and also the chronologies of the One Ring, the Silmarils, the Palantiri, and the timeline of Galadriel. All my charts are freely available on Reddit and Twitter. Starting next week, you can order any of these charts from my website genealogyandchronology.com. If you like my work, please consider supporting me on Patreon, or you can buy me a coffee by scanning this code. Please like the video and share it with your Tolkien friends and family. Thank you.